Hi.
James thought he had the perfect life. Married to Sophia in their 20s, they had built a life that many envied. Their home was warm and inviting, a haven for their two daughters, Emma and Chloe. It was a place filled with laughter, shared dreams, and unwavering support, or so James believed. He had always considered himself a lucky man, blessed with a loving wife and a family that completed him. But he would soon discover that what seemed unshakable was only an illusion. It started with little things, almost imperceptible at first. Sophia had always been passionate about her art, often losing herself in her work. But recently she seemed distant, distracted even when she was physically present. At family dinners, she would check her phone more often, her laughter becoming forced. James noticed her staying up later than usual, locked in her studio with the door closed. When he asked about it, she claimed she was working on pieces for an upcoming exhibition. Her excuses were plausible, but something about her tone felt off. One evening, James came home early and found her in the studio, her laptop open. She quickly slammed it shut when he walked in, her expression a mix of surprise and guilt. "What's wrong?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Nothing," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She said she had just been finalizing some sketches, but James felt a pit in his stomach. He didn't press her, convincing himself he was overreacting. Over the next few weeks, Sophia's behavior grew stranger. She started going out more frequently, claiming she was meeting with other artists or attending gallery events. She was evasive about where she had been and seemed irritated when James asked too many questions. Then one night, as James tried to put Chloe to bed, the little girl innocently asked, "Why is Mom always gone? Doesn't she like us anymore?" Her words hit James like a punch to the gut. He assured Chloe that her mother loved her deeply, but the question gnawed at him. The breaking point came one evening when Sophia left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. She had stepped out to take a call, and James's curiosity got the better of him. What he saw on the screen made his blood run cold. There were emails from a man named Mark, a name James didn't recognize. The messages were intimate, filled with jokes and flirtations. They talked about meeting in secret and shared details that went beyond mere friendship. James felt his chest tighten as he scrolled through the emails. His wife, the woman he had trusted with his heart, was involved with someone else. His hands trembled as he closed the laptop, his mind racing with questions. How long had this been going on? Was it just an emotional affair, or had it become physical? He sat in silence, staring at the family photos on the wall, the happy faces now mocking him. The next morning, James confronted Sophia. He waited until Emma and Chloe were at school, then placed her laptop on the dining table. "I know," he said simply. Sophia froze, her face pale. "James, let me explain," she began, but he cut her off. "Explain what? That you've been lying to me? That you've been sneaking around with Mark while I've been here taking care of our family?" Sophia broke down, admitting to the affair. She claimed it hadn't started intentionally, that Mark was just someone who understood her in ways James didn't. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said through tears. But her words felt hollow. James couldn't fathom how she could justify her betrayal. He thought about their daughters, about how their lives would be shattered if they found out. The betrayal wasn't just between him and Sophia, it threatened their entire family. As the days passed, James struggled to come to terms with what he had discovered. He tried to focus on work, but his thoughts were consumed by questions he couldn't answer. How long had she been unhappy? Was it something he had done? Or was this simply who Sophia had become? He replayed moments in his head, looking for signs he might have missed, but all it did was deepen his pain. The situation worsened when James found more evidence of Sophia's deceit. Bank statements showed large withdrawals from their joint account, funds he hadn't approved. After some digging, he discovered she had been using the money to fund trips and gifts for Mark. It wasn't just an emotional betrayal, it was financial as well. James felt humiliated, realizing that while he had been working hard to support their family, Sophia had been siphoning their resources to sustain her affair. The tension in the house became unbearable. Sophia tried to make amends, insisting she wanted to save their marriage. But every time James looked at her, all he could see was the betrayal. The love and trust they had built over years now felt like a cruel joke. He started noticing how their daughters picked up on the tension. Emma, always perceptive, asked him one night, "Dad, are you and Mom okay?" James didn't know how to answer without exposing the truth. One evening, as James sat alone in the living room, Sophia approached him. "We need to talk," she said. He didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the floor. She sat across from him, her face filled with guilt. "I'm sorry, James. I made a mistake, but I still love you. I want us to work through this." James finally looked up at her, his eyes filled with anger and pain. "You didn't just make a mistake, Sophia. You destroyed us. You destroyed everything we built together." His voice cracked, and for the first time in years, he felt tears sting his eyes. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you." As Sophia sat there in silence, James realized that their life, the perfect life he thought they had, was gone. The foundation of their marriage had crumbled, leaving behind nothing but broken pieces. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: their idyllic life had been an illusion, and now the truth lay bare. Sophia's laughter had always been a kind of music to me, easy, unrestrained, and full of warmth. But in the past few months, it had become muted, almost practiced, like an echo of what it once was. At first, I chalked it up to stress. With her upcoming exhibition and the pressure of balancing art with parenting, I assumed she was simply tired. But as time went on, it became harder to ignore the growing space between us, a distance that felt like it was creeping into every corner of our lives. It started subtly. Sophia became more guarded with her phone, something that had never been an issue before. She always left it lying around, carelessly perched on the kitchen counter or next to the sink. But now, it was either in her hand, in her pocket, or face down on the table. She started taking it with her to the bathroom, to bed, even into the garden when she stepped outside for a quick breath of air. Whenever a text came in, she'd glance at the screen and quickly swipe it away. "Who keeps texting you?" I asked one evening, my tone light but my curiosity genuine. "Just the gallery," she replied without looking up, her fingers moving quickly as she typed something back. Her explanation seemed plausible enough, but the way she avoided my eyes left a knot in my stomach. I didn't press her. I didn't want to be the kind of husband who snooped or accused without evidence. But the nagging feeling stayed, growing stronger with every passing day. The phone calls started soon after. Sophia had always been close with her mother, and it wasn't unusual for them to chat in the evenings. But these calls were different. They were quieter, more frequent, and always conducted out of earshot. I'd find her on the patio, pacing with her phone pressed tightly to her ear, her voice low and urgent. When I'd ask who it was, she'd shrug and say, "Just a friend," before quickly changing the subject. Then there were the nights she started coming to bed later than usual. Sophia had always been a night owl, often working late into the night on her art. But now it seemed different. She wasn't painting or sketching, she was on her laptop. I'd hear the faint tapping of keys and the occasional ping of notifications as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. When I'd ask her about it in the morning, she'd smile and say, "Just catching up on emails." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust her. But something about the way she avoided my gaze when she said it made my chest tighten. One night, my suspicions got the better of me. She had left her phone on the nightstand while she went to shower. It was an opportunity one hadn't been looking for but suddenly found impossible to ignore. My hands shook as I picked it up. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I'd find nothing out of the ordinary and feel foolish for even looking. But I didn't find nothing. I found messages. The name at the top of the thread was Mark. I didn't recognize it, but the tone of the messages was unmistakable. They weren't friendly or professional, they were intimate. The kind of messages filled with emojis and inside jokes, with words like "miss you" and "can't wait to see you again." My stomach churned as I scrolled through the conversation, each message feeling like a punch to the gut. "Last night was amazing," one message read. "I can still smell your perfume on my shirt." Another one said, "I wish we could have more time like that. Justice." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might wake the girls in the next room. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Was it just texts, Or had it gone further? Had she been with him while I was at work, while I was with Emma and Chloe, thinking everything was fine? The sound of the shower turning off jolted me back to reality. I quickly placed the phone back on the nightstand and climbed into bed, my hands trembling as I pulled the covers over me. When Sophia came out of the bathroom, her hair damp and her face relaxed, she smiled at me. "Why are you still awake?" she asked, climbing into bed beside me. "I couldn't sleep," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. That night, I lay awake long after Sophia had fallen asleep, her soft breaths filling the room. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness. I wanted to wake her up, to confront her right then and there, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I wasn't ready to hear whatever excuse or explanation she might give. I wasn't ready to face the reality that my wife, the woman I had loved and trusted for years, might be lying to me. The days that followed were a blur. I tried to act normal for the sake of the girls, but every time I looked at Sophia, I felt the weight of what I had discovered pressing down on me. She was still distant, still guarded, but now I saw it for what it was: guilt. Every time she smiled at me or kissed me goodbye, I wondered if it was an act, if she was thinking about him. I started noticing more signs. The way she would suddenly close her laptop when I walked into the room. The way she seemed to flinch whenever her phone buzzed, as if she was afraid I might see. The way her excuses for leaving the house felt more rehearsed, less spontaneous. One evening, I decided to follow her. She had told me she was meeting a friend for dinner, but the way she hesitated before saying it set off alarms in my head. I waited until she left, then grabbed my keys and drove after her. My heart pounded as I followed her car through the streets, every turn confirming my worst fears. She wasn't going to meet a friend, she was meeting him. I parked a few spots away and watched as she got out of the car, glancing nervously around before walking into a restaurant. A man was waiting for her at the entrance. He was tall, with a confident stance that made my blood boil. I watched as Sophia smiled at him, the kind of smile she hadn't given me in months. They hugged, their bodies lingering just a moment too long. I gripped the steering wheel, torn between storming in and confronting them or driving away and pretending I hadn't seen. In the end, I did neither. I sat there, frozen, as my perfect life unraveled before my eyes. Sophia sat across from me at the dining table, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. I had never seen her look so small, so fragile. The room was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that seemed to magnify the tension in the air. I had demanded answers after catching her meeting that man at the restaurant, but I never imagined the kind of answers I'd get. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, just let me explain before you say anything." My chest tightened, and I nodded stiffly, bracing myself for what was coming. The moment she spoke his name, Ryan, it felt like the ground beneath me gave way. "It started about 6 months ago," she said, her hands wringing in her lap. "I didn't mean for it to happen. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time." Her words were like a slap. "Seen?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I've been here, Sophia. I've been here every single day, supporting you, loving you, raising our daughters with you. And you're telling me you felt invisible?" Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't feel sympathy. I felt rage, heartbreak, humiliation, all tangled together in a knot that threatened to choke me. "It wasn't about you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It was about me. I felt lonely, James. I felt disconnected. Ryan was just someone who listened, who noticed me." "Noticed you?" I stood, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're married, Sophia. To me. If you felt lonely, you should have come to me. Not to him." She didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the table. The weight of her silence only fueled my anger. Was it just him? Was it just Ryan? I demanded. "No," she whispered after a long pause, and that single word sent me reeling. "After Ryan, I got close to someone else. My boss, Daniel." "Daniel Carter?" I said, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. I had met him once, briefly, at one of Sophia's gallery events. He had seemed charming, polished, the kind of man who exuded confidence. And now I couldn't help but see him as a vulture circling my wife. It wasn't physical, Sophia said quickly, as if that somehow made it better. We just talked a lot. He understood me in ways I didn't think anyone could. He encouraged me, supported my work. It was emotional, but it wasn't. It doesn't matter if it was physical or not. I shouted, my voice breaking. You betrayed me, Sophia. You lied to me over and over again. You let another man, no, 2 men, come between us. How am I supposed to trust you after this? She flinched at my words, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. I wanted to feel something other than anger, but I couldn't. Every memory of our life together now felt like a lie, tainted by her actions. Do the girls know? I asked suddenly, the thought hitting me like a brick. Emma and Chloe had already noticed the tension between us. Emma had even asked me if we were okay. The idea of them finding out their mother had been unfaithful made my stomach churn. No, Sophia said quickly, shaking her head. They don't know anything. I would never let them. Wouldn't let them what? Know the truth? That their mother is a liar and a cheater. I snapped. Please, James, she begged, her voice breaking. I know I've hurt you. I know I've destroyed your trust. But I want to fix this. I want to fix us. Her words hung in the air, but they felt hollow. How could she possibly fix this? How could I look at her the same way, knowing what she had done? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with Ryan, her with Daniel, smiling and laughing in ways she hadn't with me in months. It was unbearable. I spent the next few days in a haze, barely able to function. I went through the motions at work, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment that had led us to this point. I thought about Sophia's late nights, her guarded phone, the distance that had grown between us. All the signs had been there, but I had been too blind, or too trusting, to see them. At home, the atmosphere was suffocating. Sophia tried to act normal for the girls' sake, but her forced smiles and overly cheerful tone only made things worse. I avoided her as much as possible, sleeping in the guest room and barely speaking to her beyond what was necessary. Every time I saw her, all I could think about was the betrayal. Emma, perceptive as always, finally cornered me one evening while I was fixing Chloe's bike in the garage. Dad, is something going on with you and Mom? She asked, her voice hesitant. I hesitated, unsure of what to say. Emma was only 13, but she was smart, too smart for her own good. Your mom and I are just going through a rough patch, I said carefully. Is it because she's been acting weird? Emma asked, her brow furrowed. She's always on her phone, and she's been crying a lot when she thinks we're not looking. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Sophia's actions hadn't just hurt me, they were affecting the girls too. I felt a surge of anger, not just at Sophia but at myself. I had failed to protect them from this, failed to shield them from the cracks in our marriage. I'm sorry, sweetheart, I said, pulling Emma into a hug. We're trying to figure things out. That night, I confronted Sophia again. This isn't just about you and me, I said, my voice low but firm. The girls are noticing. They're seeing the distance, the tension. How do you expect me to explain this to them? Sophia looked devastated, her eyes filled with tears. I don't know, she admitted. But I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Please, James, don't give up on us. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that we could somehow rebuild what had been broken. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. The betrayal wasn't just a mistake, it was a choice, one she had made again and again. And as much as I wanted to hold on to the life we had built together, I couldn't ignore the fact that it had been shattered. That night, as I lay awake in the guest room, I realized that the trust we had once shared was gone. And without trust, what did we have left? The gala was supposed to be one of Sophia's biggest nights. She'd been working toward it for months, a grand event where her work would be showcased, rubbing shoulders with prominent figures in the art world. As her husband, I'd attended every one of her exhibitions, proudly standing by her side. But this time, pride was the last thing I felt. I wasn't there to support her, I was there to confront her. Sophia had begged me to come despite the growing rift between us. She claimed it was important for appearances, that people would notice if I wasn't there. You're still my husband, she said, her voice trembling, and tonight I need you. Her words might have meant something a year ago, but now they felt hollow, an attempt to patch over the irreparable cracks in our marriage. Still, I agreed, not because I wanted to help her but because I couldn't bear the thought of sitting at home, stewing in silence while she played the part of the perfect wife and artist. The venue was extravagant, a massive ballroom filled with chandeliers, soft music, and the hum of wealthy patrons chatting over champagne. Sophia looked stunning in a sleek black dress, her hair perfectly styled, her smile practiced and poised. It was the smile she always wore when she wanted to appear in control. To everyone else, she probably seemed flawless, but I could see the strain behind her eyes. As the evening unfolded, I watched her work the room, mingling with guests, laughing at their jokes, and accepting compliments about her latest pieces. It was like watching a stranger. The woman who had once shared everything with me was now someone I barely recognized. And then I saw him, Daniel Carter. He was standing near the bar, holding a glass of whiskey, his posture casual yet commanding. He exuded the kind of confidence that made people gravitate toward him. I watched as Sophia approached him, her face lighting up in a way that made my stomach churn. She placed a hand on his arm as she spoke, leaning in just a little too close. My blood boiled. I couldn't take it anymore. I downed the rest of my drink and walked toward them, my footsteps heavy and deliberate. As I approached, they noticed me. Sophia straightened immediately, her expression shifting from surprise to something resembling dread. "James," she said, her voice overly bright. "I was just talking to Daniel about—" "Save it," I snapped, cutting her off. I turned to Daniel, my voice loud enough to catch the attention of those around us. "So this is the man who's been keeping my wife company while I've been at home raising our daughters." The room went silent. Conversation stopped, and all eyes turned to us. Sophia's face turned ashen, and Daniel froze, his confident facade cracking for a brief moment before he composed himself. "James, this isn't the place," Sophia hissed, her voice low and urgent. "No," I said, my voice rising. "This is exactly the place. You wanted me to come tonight, to play the role of the supportive husband while you parade around with your lover? Fine. Here I am." "James, you're being ridiculous," Daniel said, his tone calm but strained. "You're making baseless accusations." "Baseless?" I laughed bitterly. "You think I don't know what's been going on? The late nights, the secret meetings, the constant texts. Do you think I'm blind?" Sophia grabbed my arm, trying to pull me away, but I shrugged her off. "Tell me, Sophia," I said, turning to her. "How long has it been? How long have you been lying to me, to our daughters?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a moment, I thought she might confess. But instead, she said, "James, stop. Please. Let's talk about this somewhere private." "But, so you can lie to me some more?" I said, my voice breaking. "I'm done being lied to. Everyone here deserves to know who you really are." The crowd murmured around us, whispers spreading like wildfire. Sophia's colleagues, patrons, and even a few reporters were watching, their expressions ranging from shock to pity. Daniel tried to speak again, but I silenced him with a glare. "You're a coward," I said, my voice dripping with venom. "You knew she was married. You knew we have kids. But that didn't stop you, did it? You didn't care about destroying a family as long as you got what you wanted." "I think you've said enough," Daniel said, his voice cold now, his composure slipping. "No," I said, stepping closer to him. "I haven't said enough. Not even close." Sophia was crying openly now, her hands trembling as she tried to pull me back. "James, please," she whispered. "You're humiliating me." "Humiliating you?" I said, turning back to her. "You did this to yourself, Sophia. You made this choice. Don't you dare blame me for your actions." The tension in the room was suffocating. I could feel the weight of everyone's stares, but I didn't care. The anger that had been simmering inside me for months had finally boiled over, and I wasn't about to stop now. Sophia had betrayed me, not just as her husband but as the father of her children. And Daniel, smug, self-assured Daniel, had taken what wasn't his without a second thought. Security eventually approached, gently urging me to leave. I looked around the room one last time, taking in the shocked faces, the whispers, the judgment. Sophia's reputation was in ruins, her carefully curated image shattered. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part felt hollow. This wasn't just her downfall, it was the collapse of everything we had built together. As I left the gala, the cold night air hit me like a slap. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling. I didn't feel triumphant or justified. I felt broken. The woman I had loved, the mother of my children, had been reduced to a stranger I couldn't recognize. And in exposing her, I had exposed myself as well, a man betrayed, humiliated, and utterly lost. When I got home, the house was quiet. Emma and Chloe were asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm tearing their family apart. I sat in the dark living room, staring at nothing, the weight of what had happened pressing down on me. I had thought confronting Sophia publicly would bring me closure, but all it had done was leave me with an even deeper sense of loss. The house felt different without Sophia in it. Quieter, heavier somehow, as if the walls themselves were holding on to the tension that had filled our lives for months. After the gala, there was no salvaging what was left of our marriage. Sophia moved out a week later, taking only her personal belongings and leaving the rest behind, as if abandoning not just the house, but the life we had built together. It was almost a relief to see her go. The divorce was inevitable. Sophia's lawyers reached out within days, trying to frame the situation as amicable, but there was nothing amicable about what she had done. The betrayal, the lies, the public humiliation, all of it had destroyed any semblance of goodwill between us. I wasn't angry anymore, I was resolute. I needed to protect Emma and Chloe from the chaos she had brought into our lives. When it became clear that we were heading into a custody battle, I prepared myself for the worst. I knew Sophia loved the girls in her own way, but her actions over the past year had shown where her priorities truly lay. She had spent more time on her career, her exhibitions, and her relationships with men like Ryan and Daniel than she had with her daughters. The girls had noticed too, especially Emma, who was old enough to understand that her mother's presence had become more of an afterthought. The courtroom was a stark, sterile place, but the emotions it held were anything but. Sophia sat on one side, looking polished and composed, as if she were heading to another gala rather than a hearing about her children's future. I sat across from her, my focus entirely on the two most important people in my life, Emma and Chloe. They were the reason I was fighting, and I wasn't going to let them down. My lawyer laid out everything: Sophia's emotional absence, her erratic behavior, the nights she prioritized work or personal affairs over being there for her daughters. I could see Sophia's composure falter as the evidence piled up. Witnesses, including close friends and even a few of her colleagues, testified to her growing distance from her family. Texts and emails revealed her priorities in black and white: career first, family second. When it was her turn to speak, Sophia tried to defend herself. She talked about how much she loved the girls, how she had always wanted to provide for them, to show them that a woman could succeed in a demanding career. But her words felt empty, especially when weighed against the reality of her choices. Even the judge seemed unimpressed, pointing out that love required more than words. It required action, time, and presence, all things she had neglected. The moment the ruling was announced, granting me full custody, I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. This wasn't how I had imagined my life would turn out, raising Emma and Chloe on my own, without the woman I had once loved by my side. But it was the right thing to do. The girls deserved stability, consistency, and someone who would put them first. Sophia didn't argue. She looked defeated, as if she had already known this was coming. She was granted visitation rights, but even those seemed half-hearted. In the weeks that followed, she missed several scheduled visits, citing work commitments or last-minute travel for her exhibitions. Emma stopped asking about her after a while, and Chloe, still too young to fully understand, simply accepted that mommy was busy. I focused all my energy on the girls, doing everything I could to give them a sense of normalcy. Mornings were chaotic but filled with laughter as I juggled packing lunches, finding lost shoes, and making sure homework was in backpacks. Evenings became our time to reconnect, whether it was helping Emma with her science projects or reading Chloe her favorite bedtime stories. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Every smile, every hug, every moment of joy reminded me why I was doing this. Sophia faded from our lives, her presence reduced to occasional phone calls and birthday cards. I thought there would be bitterness or anger, but what I felt most was sadness. Sadness for the woman she had once been, for the family we had been, and for what she had lost in her pursuit of something she thought was more important. In the end, the girls and I found our rhythm. We became a team, leaning on each other and finding strength in the bond we shared. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough.
Bye.